Hello everyone. Just testing the mic, and we'll be starting soon in 5 minutes, waiting for our guest. And meanwhile, we'll appreciate if you can share this Twitter space in your Twitter profile. Hello, hey Andrew. Just invited you to speak on this Twitter space, so please accept the invite. Yeah, Andrew, maybe try uh, joining back again because I just sent a speaker invite, but seems like you're not a speaker yet. And I also invited our table and friends also as co-host. Let me know if you're not able to join in. Yeah, seems a little bit trouble from Andrew's end. Let me ping him again once. Yeah, Andrew, I just sent you a speaker invite again. Just check once if you've received the notification. Yeah, it seems like you are here now. Hello, hey Andrew. Can you hear me? Yeah, seems like Andrew is on mute. So maybe check your mic or speaker settings once.
Hey, good morning. Sorry about that. I actually had some weird Bluetooth issues, but I'm here now.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to have you here. Um,
Yeah,
cool. So we can start, and um, yeah, so glad to have you here, and everyone who has joined us in this Twitter space. And the good thing is it's being recorded as well, so somebody who misses it can listen to it later. And I see Matt here in our Twitter space as well, one of the best DevRels in the FVM community. So I'll also invite him to join in, and maybe he can also ask some questions that he want to ask to Andrew as well. So yeah, Matt, I'll also send you a speaker invite, and then parallelly we'll just start. Cool, awesome. Let's start off with couple of questions, and then we will open up to the audience near the end. And yeah, Andrew, let's start off with if you want to tell us everyone about yourself and what you are building at Tableland.
sure. Yeah. Well, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on your spaces this morning or this evening for you, and thanks everybody for joining in. So my name is Andrew Hill. I'm co-founder at Tableland, and we're building a decentralized database for Web3. So Tableland actually, it's kind of worthwhile for this audience maybe to back up. Tableland actually is coming from a company called Textile. My co-founder and I started Textile really as a lab to research and understand how data was going to change on the internet. And we worked sort of in various areas for a number of years, but really quickly we're drawn towards everything that was being built in IPFS and Filecoin, and the idea that decentralized data storage and data networking really could be a shift in the way that we were, building with data, owning data, transacting with data, securing data online. And so we built out a number of different projects in that ecosystem, Tableland really being the latest and really our biggest focus yet. And so Tableland comes from this realization from talking to a lot of users and understanding a lot of what projects we're trying to build, that folks still didn't have a great database that they could use in Web3 projects. And so for us, a great database, the way that we started circling what that could mean was through these discussions, really finding out people wanted a decentralized database. So something they didn't have to pay a credit card for or use traditional authentication for, be able to use wallets to authenticate to the database. They wanted it to be interoperable with all of the other protocols and building blocks in Web3. So that means being able to use the database from your dApp in the front end or being able to orchestrate it from a smart contract were important equally by different projects. And that ability to program access control natively in Web3 was really important. So how could you how could you hand over control to pieces of data to specific users based on their address and nothing more? So no sort of like, here's your wallet address, we're going to map it to an API key or something like that. Have it purely inside of Web3 was really important. And so Tableland really comes from that. And Tableland, Tableland is a decentralized database, and I'd say its superpowers are really kind of solving those issues that I just brought up. So you can program and you can interact with the database with any wallet or smart contract. You can define like really nuanced access control rules. So you can do row level access control. You could even do cell level access control, and you can write those rules right in Solidity. And it's a relational database. And so the final kind of superpower really is kind of a differentiator in Web3 is that you can build on it with SQL. So SQL is a if for those of you that aren't familiar with databases, is the lingua franca of data and databases for many years, but a lot of kind of newer sort of takes on what a database needs to be, powerful SQL can be in, so you don't get the SQL language. But we're building with SQLite, which is a really robust and powerful database engine, and it allows us to embed SQL right into all of our different Web3 things.
Awesome, that's great to know. And I think you covered a lot of different points there, which we would cover one by one in depth as well. But was there any particular, some inspiration that you thought, man, I need to move from maybe using traditional databases like Postgres or like some centralized server to having decentralized database? Was like some particular moment you thought that um, this is the missing puzzle that we need to solve?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different there are a few different kind of moments or like periods of reflection where we realized this. And I think it's worth saying up front, I don't think every project that's building on Postgres on an AWS instance is going to move to Tableland. I think that there's plenty of use cases for that setup that it just doesn't matter, that the data is there and that nobody's really at risk for it being there. So, but there is this audience of people and projects that are building decentralized applications and are trying to sort of remove the points of failure, the human points of failure, where any particular node could be taken out of their application and ruin the application for all parties. And so some examples of that, it's not like guarding against some bad actors all the time, although that's like censorship on the internet is a real thing. But it's also like developers being able to not have to worry about a credit card being up to date on a service, being able to build an application that will just run for decades to come without any single person necessarily having to maintain it. So yeah, I think like I think that we kind of tailor to two different buckets of needs right now, and I think the first bucket of needs that we really identified was this data management side of things. So like that idea that so many projects are trying to build a smart contract and trying to build a decentralized application, but then at the end of the day, they need a database. So like I always kind of visualize it in my head like this really clean kind of triangle of developer tools where you have like business logic in the smart contract as one point of the triangle. You have decentralized data storage as the second point on the triangle. And then there's this third point, which is like mutable data. It's performant queryable data. It's data access rules, access control rules. It's all those things that are naturally in a database. And so this developer that's been building in this space is able to get those first 2 points on the triangle with decentralized options fairly easily now. But that third option of the database, we just see time and again that if they need it, they do one of three things. They limit what their application can really do because they build it in the smart contract, which isn't really a database. Obviously, you can keep mutable data in a smart contract, but you're limited to maps and key value stores, pretty simple structures. And then querying that data is very challenging. Or you just don't do it, or you put down a credit card and you use a centralized database. So it means you naturally have to break out of this vision for what you really wanted your application to be, and you become the single point of failure in that entire application. So that data management simplification piece is really obvious with Tableland. Then the second bucket of things are those people that wanted mutable data. So the ability to quickly and easily create data that was backing decentralized applications where that data was being modified by on-chain actions. And so the Rigs NFT is a really great example of that, where if you are if people are just getting to know Tableland, Rigs is our community NFT, and that NFT is built on Tableland, and it allows actually it's the instantiation of that triangle where we have smart contracts that are running the NFT and manage ownership and manage access control rules, like I was saying, that you could build those. And then we have the second point where the media for the NFT is stored on IPFS and Filecoin. And then the third point, which is the database, is Tableland. And in that setup, it allows us to start building these really cool features and extensions to the NFT where the actions of the users are changing and modifying these really big data sets that are stored in Tableland. And then those data sets drive marketplaces and wallets, but they also drive our application called the Garage, where people can do more kind of interactions with their NFT, and they can change the appearance of their NFT. And we have some other kind of cool features in there around community interactions coming up too. But so that second bucket of being able to have this like really dynamic mutable data where you build all sorts of like vibrant life into your NFT or your decentralized application, whatever it is sort of that second bucket.
Very interesting to touch on these two needs of data management simplification and mutable data. And before moving on to the next question, I want to ask around this Rigs community NFT that you have, because I found a very interesting feature out there. Because when I went to OpenSea previously, I don't know if OpenSea still allows it, but when you click on that NFT, rather than seeing a picture or let's say a video, uh, there is actually an application I can play on with table queries that I can click, and it gives me dynamic data on that OpenSea interface as well. So how did that happen? I think I haven't seen that before. Maybe it's a special file type, but
Uh,
um,
yeah, okay, so that's different. So rigs, just so people are watching, to clarify, rigs, our community NFT, they look like these different ships and vehicles that are exploring this other world called Tableland. So that's the collection for our community. What you're referring to are when people create tables on the Tableland protocol, we actually represent every table of data as an NFT. It makes a lot of sort of sense at a basic level that these are data sets that are owned and can be transacted against and with. And so the best representation we have for that in Web3 is actually an NFT in the ERC 721. So every time you create a data set in Tableland, it mints an NFT. And because those are just, uh, those are just standard NFTs that are published with standard NFT metadata, they show up. Like, so if you create a table, you own this table and it will show up in your wallet and it will show up in OpenSea. So if you go to OpenSea and look at those, there's kind of two ways you can see them. And this just has to do with the way that OpenSea works. And they've been kind of the leader as far as marketplaces for a long time. Obviously that's changing as we speak, but what they kind of pushed was the NFT that you see when you look at the collections page, it's the static file. So in the metadata of the NFT, there's a field for image. There's some variation there, but like generally that image field it will publish a SVG or a PNG, and it has to be static. So if you go to the collection page, you'll see that a bunch of static NFTs for tables. And we can tweet out maybe the Mumbai collection is pretty neat. And then, but those are all SVGs that just give the metadata about the current state of the data set. Unfortunately, those have to be refreshed pretty regularly, and so some of them might be out of date still, but compared to what the actual data is on Tableland. But that's just a marketplace quirk. So, but if you click into any one of those, now this is what you're referring to. If you click into any one of those, OpenSea allows you to have another field called animation URL, and animation URL lets you render any HTML, and so we have a little React application. I think it's React, I'm pretty sure it's React application. And when you're in the React application, you can, it renders as a SQL interface. So it lets anybody, like in the OpenSea application, it lets you go into that NFT and play with this little SQL console directly on that specific data set in query and filter it. And that was just a kind of cool experiment that we had, that we could start shipping SQL everywhere. Now, all that is further caveated by, I think there's an issue with the OpenSea. So OpenSea, when they render these assets in their marketplace, they want to make it look really clean. Like if an NFT isn't working and then OpenSea tries to render it, it makes OpenSea look bad. And so they have their own caching and CDNs and everything. And we noticed just yesterday that they changed something with their CDN, and it's doing something weird on that animation URL, I believe. So if you go and click around today, it might not be the greatest experience, but that's OpenSea, I think, not us, but we'll get that fixed. Anyway, that's the explanation of it.
Yeah, I think that was a cool experiment. Like I haven't ever previously thought that I would be using a SQL console out of a regular NFT marketplace platform. So
Totally.
that's pretty cool experiment. And I see Tableland community definitely growing from last couple of months. And you highlighted a lot of features that are possible, like with this row cell access control, etc. So I want to point to like if you want to share what are some projects and use cases being built on Tableland right now in the community.
Yeah, sure. So I would say it's still handy to kind of think of it across those use cases. And we see kind of in the first bucket of the data management simplification, they're usually kind of more advanced applications or even DAOs, which are applications in a different sense. And then on the second, which is the mutable data, it's often NFTs and games and things like that. So a couple cool ones for games. One that we've been working with for quite a while, and we can tweet out their account here too. It's called Kitty Cart, and so Kitty Cart is a playable NFT where you race that NFT across different levels and competitors, and by racing the NFT, that NFT's metadata is running through Tableland, and so you can win and level up your NFT, and it changes the appearance and the attributes of that NFT by playing it. Another one that is one of our good friends are called Drivers, so dr/VRS. And we've been collaborating with them for a while. They went through our grant program called the Pilot Program, and they have a pretty straightforward PFP collection, but they're also doing a lot of experiments on how to extend that with different mutable and kind of sort of playable, sort of gamified metadata driven through Tableland. Another one sort of similar in that bucket is called Ecoland. They're really early, and that's a playable NFT where they're working to make it so it's regenerative. So actually restoring trees and like good things for the planet by playing their game. And they have a game, but what they're actually building with Tableland isn't necessarily the gamified pieces. It's actually a marketplace inside of it. So I think this is a really pretty straightforward use case for Tableland is like every marketplace has all this metadata that's dynamic. So if you're trying to build a white labeled NFT marketplace, you're going to have to do things like storing all the NFTs that are for sale, what their different prices are, if they're auctions, what the bids are, all of that. And so that's really great data to be putting into Tableland and can be driven that way. And so they're doing something just like that. And then in the data management side, one of my favorites lately on that is a project called zk-sig, because the idea is so easy to understand, I guess, and share with you. So they're building a DocuSign clone, and it's all driven by ZK signatures. So all the data in the application is private to the parties that are signing and collaborating. But then there's a system on top of it where you can be generating proofs on top of the signatures that are made. And I think it's really cool, and it actually could be more powerful than simple Web2 alternatives, which is one of the best types of things to be building in Web3.
Yeah, definitely those are some interesting use case. And since you also mentioned interoperable, when I asked you the first question as a property as well for these decentralized database, so how do you think um, it is interoperable with the existing infrastructure stack that we have in Web3? And I would also like Matt to also join in, particularly with this question around how does Tableland play out with storage on Filecoin and smart contracts on Filecoin virtual machine?
Yeah, so it's no secret anymore that we're coming out with FEVM support imminently. So the idea there is that you'll be able to use Tableland directly in smart contracts in Filecoin. And we're really excited about this because it enables a whole new set of interactions, because you have access to those storage deals and statuses and all that good stuff. So one thing that for people that haven't built with smart contracts, haven't actually like gotten in there and tried to build a smart contract or build an application on smart contracts, it may not be intuitive that when you're creating data structures and data inside of the actual smart contract in those maps and key value stores and everything, the state variables, so everything that kind of is a semi-public representation of data in that smart contract, it's not actually easy to get that data back out. So if you're doing that today on Ethereum or any place else, you're typically using an API, and oftentimes it's like pretty tricky to capture that data in the right way that it's like easily queryable from those APIs. And so now imagine that you're building a smart contract in Filecoin where you want to have, like there's a really nice application I talked about a lot in the Filecoin ecosystem around data DAOs. So imagine you want to build a data DAO and you want that data DAO to have a really nice, clean feed of all of the different storage deals that are happening, what the CIDs and the PCIDs of those deals contain, and then what the status is, like what miners have picked them up, what miners have completed them. All that information is technically there in Filecoin, but being able to pull it together into a structured database where you can make performant queries against will make your life to build an application so much easier. And that stuff's pretty straightforward now that we're coming to the FEVM. That and the DAO comment actually just made me realize, like, I think there's this whole like area of development we need to do as a community around interoperable data. Just having better tools for communities to surface like community conventions about the data they're storing. So what I mean by that is that Web3 is starting to have all this rich data emerge, but it's just so scattered and stored in such different ways, actually. So the only case I can really point to in Web3 where data has a really strong convention, I guess there's some really small ones, but the only one that has like a sizable amount of data that has a strong community convention on how we store it are NFTs. So, and that's largely because projects like OpenSea publish metadata standards that every project starts to conform to. And that's good and bad. The good part is that we have this really rich data that we can all expect it to look that way, and we get it into EIPs and things like that. But the bad part is that we're sort of hampered by the speed at which OpenSea will change their metadata docs to enable new kinds of features. So I'm pretty sure, I don't know the actual history of this, but that animation URL field that I mentioned earlier that Riggs uses, I'm pretty sure that was just an invention of OpenSea, maybe in collaboration with a project that wanted it or needed it for something they were doing. And so then they put it into their metadata docs, and projects like ours use it and do it, but it isn't necessarily implemented or used by every marketplace or every wallet. And so it's a little bit in limbo, but it is kind of growing as a community convention. So that's cool. But anyway, all this is to back up and say, I think in Filecoin, we could do things really cool here with using Tableland to sort of structure these different databases and the schemas, because those actually start to allow conventions to emerge. So if you're building a data DAO, you could be actually capturing the metadata for lots of these things. So like, what's your deal flow and pipeline? What's the history of records? What's your voting? Like, what data has been purged? Who are your members? What are their roles? Lots of different, like, rich structured metadata, which if done on Tableland, you could actually be establishing metadata models that other data DAOs could easily adopt or extend or come up with counter proposals to. But what's really cool when you do that is then if you have two data DAOs that are doing that, you'll potentially get a third. And if you have three, then people can come along and start going, I should just build tools that power these data DAOs by using that data. Because if I build it on this one DAO's metadata and build them a cool tool, then these other two DAOs can use it too, that without any fuss. We can't do that right now, but it would be very easy with a tool like Tableland in the mix for projects like this. So I'm just kind of excited to explore that.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Hey, folks, it's Matt here
Hi, Matt.
from Particle Labs and Filecoin. Hey, yeah, I think what really excites me with regards to this and FEM and Filecoin is, Filecoin is great in terms of storing large, unstructured data for archival long-term storage. And then you've got like the opposite end in which you've got like storing, as you say, like you can store key values within a smart contract, which is, a lot more potentially immutable in terms of storage, but you're limited in space and you're limited in kind of the way in which you can access that data. And I see Tableland as being like a really nice like third option there that's going to suit a lot of requirements for this. And you've already talked about kind of like a metadata around deals and that kind of thing. I think that's ideal. And just abstracting one level away, like you said, so that multiple data DAOs can access it. That's really cool. I actually had two questions here. One was about, is it possible within Tableland to have data accessible from two different blockchains? Since you're working kind of cross-chain, is it possible to have a single table that's accessible by multiple blockchains at all?
Well, on the read side, sort of on the internet facing gateways, yeah, like you can read data from all different networks. But we do have some rules in place where, for example, you can't be collaborating on data from two different smart contracts in two different chains. And that's right now driven by the fact that the timing of finality and block times of those things make that really tricky and could open up a rat's nest around, you have a data set that's owned or like is permissioned to a contract in Filecoin and a contract in Ethereum. Like in the contract in Ethereum, maybe it issues a delete row, and at the same time ish as the contract in Filecoin issues the insert, right? And then we hit some weird universe where the network wouldn't be really sure what to do with those. Right. So for determinism, okay, yeah, we don't allow that, but you can read them, of course.
Yeah, Matt. Did you had another question as well? Can you hear me, Andrew?
I can hear you. I feel like Matt might have dropped out for a second.
Got it. Cool. Let's wait for him to join. Meanwhile, another question that I had was around. I know you mentioned that uh, the aim is not to move like every use case of Postgres centralized AWS use case to uh, like decentralized databases like Tableland. But what do you think are some of the barriers that needs to be solved for the mass adoption of these decentralized databases, and if that's even is a goal or not, if it makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously. I think I think it really comes down to three areas broadly. This is probably just true to most applications. I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that answer, but um, uh, scalability. So this is to answer the question of like, how do we get mass adoption of these databases across the internet, which is the goal. And so we need better scalability. We need to address privacy, which is something we haven't spoken about today, but it's worth actually mentioning there, and I'll come back to that. And we need to address usability. And so just to work backwards through those, on the usability side, some of the superpowers of Tableland, I think, come from being Web3 native. So that idea that you can, people can use Tableland with a wallet. They don't need any like new things on top of that. It's just use the things you're already using, build applications that actually hit the database from anybody's wallet. And if they're permission to do it, great. All that, I find those to be superpowers and something that actually Web2 databases can't do today without a lot of fuss. And so if Web3 is continuing to build traction and continue to build great things, having a database that works with those same rules and is programmable in the same way, that's amazing. But it comes at sort of a cost to the broader internet around usability, right? Like to use Tableland, you have to have a wallet. So right now that's kind of a superpower, but it also is a limiter for adoption for a lot of people. And there's a lot of other questions around usability that kind of come like spiral from that. And so those are things we're trying to address right now. And we just had we just shared some work that we're doing on the Tableland Studio, which is the UI. It's the app for the protocol. And we're definitely trying to address some of those challenges in there. It feels like the right place to abstract away some of the things that come along with being a protocol. Privacy, I think we really started building Tableland thinking a lot about NFTs and DAOs and these use cases of Web3 that were default open. And there's a lot of need for a database that is default open and a lot of really cool things that we can build there. And so, and even in places where people are, starting to push private data through Web3, there's still metadata that is open. So definitely lots of use cases there too. But we haven't really tackled head-on privacy, so being able to create private databases or private queries. And we know that is something that we will address. It's just not been a priority yet. It feels like we don't want to start a new project to solve privacy on Web3. So what we're better suited doing is tackling the things that are solvable today and starting to collaborate and work closer with projects that are solving privacy head on, and then make Tableland interoperable with those things. And I think that stuff will come. And then the last one around scalability. So we're really we always call it an open beta. So the protocol runs on multiple different main nets. People can use it. We have plans for keeping that data around and being able to power those applications. But there's a lot of work we still have to do on the protocol. So we haven't launched our own mainnet. So we plan to have a network where nodes are actually running this database all over the world. That would add scalability, and we're starting to have some pretty concrete thoughts about how that would help scalability. But we're also doing a lot of work on what does the database actually need to do around, proving the data availability and responding to queries and being able to really power applications quickly. And we're not in the early days of that. We're pretty far along in our thinking. We've been thinking about the network protocol and decentralization and things for over a year now, and how this would come together. And we're working on some things that we're going to publish around that soon. But we're also working really closely with some Filecoin teams who are helping us think through a lot of this too, and kind of learning from the masters what they've done and what they've learned in the past, and figuring out what are the latest and greatest innovations there that we can tap into to build an amazing database, scalable database for the internet. So I would say I don't have like a ton of things I can really share with you on that today, because a lot of them are like, we're really far down the decision pathway, but we're not fully resolved. But like I said, we're gonna be putting out some writing on this in the next 2 months, within the next 1 to 2 months is the goal. So we'll have some cool updates for that.
Cool, awesome, great to address those 3 points around usability, privacy, and scalability in particularly. Would love to know more whenever those things are in place. Um, and yeah, Matt, if you're here, you wanted to ask a second question as well. Yeah, seems a trouble from Matt's end. But yeah, cool. Let's move to some of the ending questions today. Uh, One important question is, how can the listeners get involved with Tableland and the community itself?
Yeah, I'd say there's kind of 3 options there. Go to tableland.xyz. That's not how, but that's just where you can find links to all these things. If you're a developer and you want to be building things, just jump right into our docs. Dan and our team has done a really incredible job organizing and writing and really thinking through how to share this project with people. So I think our docs are really phenomenal. No credit to myself. That's not me bragging. That's me bragging about Dan being awesome. So go check those out. If you are more interested in where we're going around usability, and maybe you're not building smart contracts yet, but you'd like to use a database like this, on the homepage there's a link for the Studio waitlist. And so the Studio I mentioned before is the app for the protocol. Join that waitlist. We should be having people come and kick the tires in a few months, but we'd be really excited to have you. And then last thing is, if you're interested in just asking questions or want to just engage with us, or might not be able to engage today but want to pop back in a couple weeks and ask any questions, jump into our Discord. So there's a link on our homepage for that as well. There's a couple of channels, like, just introduce yourself in general, or jump over into the developer chat. Let us know what you've got on mind that you want to build, and yeah, we'd be excited to have you. And if you're part of the FVM hack right now, definitely say hi to us in those channels too, because we'd love to help you building whatever you're building.
Awesome. And one last thing, if you want to give some advice for builders and young builders especially.
Yeah, I mean, I saw a newsletter the other day. I wish I could remember what newsletter it was, so I could give credit. But I was like, gosh, that is the greatest advice for every project. Don't overbuild. Like, I think we're in this period of a bear market in Web3. So the sort of slogan around is that we're putting our heads down and building. At the same time, I think for new projects and new entrepreneurs, be careful not to overbuild. And that just means find users who want what you're building before you go too far, and commit too many resources or hire too many people to build the wrong thing. So just be careful about that, and really work to find your users. It's something I've been thinking about a lot for a long time, and I'm happy to chat with anybody if they want thoughts on how to reach users or talk to users or understand products they're building. But yeah, just build for excited people, even if it's a small number of them, and you'll be on a good track.
Awesome. I think that's an amazing advice. Don't overbuild. And I think
Yeah.
a good one to end with as well. And I think we are pretty much on time today. So I would like to thank you for joining our space and everyone who joined in this space as well. And we'll have the recording up for it soon as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks everybody for stopping in.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. See you. Bye bye.